good early afternoon. We are live here on the Blue Plate Special. I'm Andy Andrews. You have joined us in Orange Beach, Alabama at the Wharf. So we're excited to be here today. It's a pretty day here in Orange Beach. We have a studio full of people. We're glad everybody's here. We've got a great show. We've really got a great show. Now, I know I say that a lot, but today we really have a great show. We're going to talk about the 5 forgotten historical stories from American history. I guess they would be historical if they're from American history, wouldn't they? So, but anyway, these are 5 forgotten stories that we're going to cover, and we're glad you are here with us. You like the shirt? The shirt is a fish hippie shirt. It's from Sand Dollar Lifestyles, right down here, the cornerstone of the Wharf. And if you visit us, you got to visit them. And if you visit them and you visit us, you got to have your pictures taken on the escalator statues. You know, the other day we had a big quartz board delivered for in here in the studio room, the control room, and they called and told me it was here. And I walked outside, and a guy was carrying this thing and walking on the escalator statue, which is just unbelievable. I'm surprised he wasn't arrested for doing that. But, I mean, you don't see people out here hanging on the Marlin statues. But here's a guy walking on the escalator statues. We have 4 of them here at the Wharf. You take your picture with them when you get here. If you're new to us, we would like you to if you're on Facebook, click that notification button and then turn the notifications on your phone. That way, anytime we go live here at Wisdom Harbor, you will be notified that we are live. And if you would also share, sharing is caring. And so if you would click that share button on your Facebook account and just share to your page, that way they will see what you're seeing right now. And if you're on LinkedIn, we're glad to have you here. If you're on YouTube, joining us that way, click that subscribe button. That would help us a lot. And if you're with Twitter, Brian Backen is the captain of Twitter. We're glad to have you here. Jeff Herring, you think this is a red shirt? You like this? Yep. It's pretty red. It's not crimson red like Alabama that lost on Saturday. Don't get me started. So, in studio, we have, now where's Rebecca and Mike from Birmingham? You guys? Are y'all married? You look so young to be married. But that's okay. All right. Rebecca and Mike. All right. And then Jeff, Franny, and Sarah Ann, you're from Brentwood. All right. All right. We're glad to have y'all here. So did you like come here on purpose, or did you just like wander by and go, well, that looks like it's air conditioned? Yeah. Steve and Beth from Cincinnati. Hey guys, how are y'all? So glad y'all are here. I think that it is hilarious that the Cincinnati airport is actually like in Kentucky, isn't it? Yeah. That's just amazing to me. Carl, Cookie, David, and Sandra, all from Heron, Illinois. Man, we're so glad to have you guys here. And notice that I pronounced that correctly. We did a mispronunciation show the other day, and one of the things that we got on people about mispronouncing was Chicago, Illinois. It's like, oh God. All right. And then Lynn and Jim, the Tuesday people. They're our Tuesday guests. And hey, you guys back there, I'm glad y'all are here. And Craig, you're from Seattle, right? Man, you get the shirt for coming the longest distance. I mean, Wow. So you're Walt, John, and Peyton from Louisiana, right? Okay. All right. Well, we're glad y'all are here. Patricia Clapp, hi, from North Carolina. We've got some North Carolina information for you today. Bob Woodall. Buddy, hey, we need to talk today. That video you sent me the other day, very good. Sandra Mendonca from Searcy, Arkansas, home of Harding University, where they ate their mascot. That's right. Jeff Herring, hey buddy, how are you doing? Nancy Asaley Bergen, good afternoon. From Monte Vista, Colorado. Betty Rayford from Sacramento, California. Judy Atkinson, nothing better than eating a late lunch and listening to Andy. And you're from Cleveland, Tennessee. This is not really a late lunch for you. Aren't you Central Time? So this is not really a late lunch. Okay. But we're glad you're here. Mark Suter, hello from the UK. And that's the United Kingdom, not the University of Kentucky. I'm just assuming. Marcy Crossell Taylor, good morning. Love the professional noticer this morning. Didn't you like that? The professional noticer comes out every Tuesday morning. That's our podcast. And if you're not getting that, you need to go on andyandrews.com and sign up on the VIP email list. Just put your email in there, and that will come to you every Tuesday morning. And this Tuesday, we had Tiffany King, who is she is the eat-at-home guru. I mean, she literally created this business for families to eat at home, where she does the menus and she has this beautiful cookbook, Eat at Home Tonight. But check that out, and she's quite an entrepreneur. Just a mom with 4 kids, and during a downturn in the economy in 2008, got going, and she literally, I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say millions of readers that she has. So it's just amazing. Judith DeWitt, good morning, from Eastern Washington State. It's 36 degrees there? 36 degrees. Marcy Crossell Taylor shared. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You guys ready to get started on the history portion of our show? All right. Now, I always, I came to history late in my life. I didn't like history in school, which is amazing to me. And, I blame my teachers for it. I blame them. Really, because I just think if I had just had a teacher who just came in one day and said, okay, close your books. We're not going to memorize dates. I'm just going to tell you a story. And it's true. If I had somebody do that, I'd have, because history, it's stories. That's just, And so I'm fascinated by history now. And I read a lot of just odd stuff, in the Traveler's Gift we have Joshua Chamberlain, which that's the story that most people have not heard, and I always thought that was such a crazy story that one guy did something that has our country working like it doesn't right now, but it has us living like we live. Really responsible for America being one continental group. And I found that story just by reading. And then when I wrote the Traveler's Summit, I was wanting to find another idea of somebody that had done something great that you didn't know who they were, that most people didn't know. Because by the time I wrote the Traveler's Gift, or the Traveler's Summit, which is the sequel to the Traveler's Gift, I had already written The Heartmender, which The Heartmender is the story of Nazi submarines in the Gulf of Mexico during World War II, and most people don't know that happened. And so, but I was reading actually, I'm probably the only person you'll ever meet who has read the Nuremberg trial transcripts. And so I was reading the trial transcripts one day, and there was this colonel that was on trial for something or everything. And he made the comment, if it weren't for Erickson, we would have won the war. And so I couldn't find any reference to Erickson other than that. I looked on the internet. I couldn't find anything. And then it was like a couple of years later that I was reading some stuff that Eisenhower had done in interviews after he became president. And I read where he said, if it hadn't been for Erickson, we would still be fighting the war. And so I was like, okay, this has got me now. This has got a cross-section on me. And so, the Nazi submarine stuff, that's one of those kind of things that if you hadn't heard about it, well, you can, if you know to Google it, you can find it pretty immediately. You just got to know to look. But this Erickson thing, Erik Erikson, I mean, even if you know to look, there's just not much on it. But but the story is in the Traveler Summit, and I kind of agree with the Nazi colonel and with Eisenhower. If it hadn't been for this guy, I mean, things would have turned out a lot different. But it's an amazing story. But today we're going to talk about 5 more forgotten. There's a ton of forgotten history. There's just a ton of it because, hey, I guess you just can't tell it all. But we're gonna tell 5 pieces of it today. The first one that I wanted to talk about was the original 13 states, right? Well, this was almost number 14, the almost 14th state. It was at the close of the American Revolution, and our newly formed U.S. Congress was deep in debt. And so in 1784, the province, not yet the state of North Carolina, voted to give 29 million acres of land between the Allegheny Mountains and the Mississippi River to Congress to ease the financial troubles. So the U.S. government had 2 years to accept responsibility for the area. But in the meantime, Western settlements on this land feared that they were going to be left to deal with the Cherokee tribes alone, or even that Congress would sell the territory off to a foreign entity. And so a few months later, North Carolina took back its offer, and they reclaimed authority over the land, which is now eastern Tennessee. Okay, that's where it is now. But they were, the people were unhappy that lived there with North Carolina's governments over the area. And so the frontier people from the region, which, when you think about it, that was really the West then. That was as far west as anybody gotten. And so the frontiersmen decided to establish their land as a separate independent state that they called Frank Land. Okay, now, I'm not sure who Frank was. Okay, but he was evidently a big enough deal that they were going to name the land after him. So this was Frank Land. In August of 1784, delegates from these counties gathered in Jonesboro, and they elected leaders for their new state of Frankland and even drafted a state constitution. On May 16, 1785, they petitioned Congress for statehood, and 7 out of the 13 existing U.S. provinces voted in favor. But the Articles of Confederation required a 2/3 majority. Okay, so 7 out of 13 didn't do it for Frankland, and they retooled. They decided they're going to make their petition sound like a better idea, and so they changed the name to Franklin, and got in touch with Benjamin Franklin and said, "Oh, we named it after you. We named it after you. Would you support us?" But he said no. And these Franklinites existed in their own little republic for just over 4 years, and they expanded their territory gradually. So, but after conflict with the North Carolina administration, the Franklin government collapsed in early 1789, and North Carolina took back full control of the land. And they took it back, and then not long after, North Carolina voted again to give the territory to Congress, and the area eventually became part of Tennessee. But here's the cool part that if you knew that, you might not know this, but Davy Crockett was actually born in the state of Franklin, and his father was a very passionate Franklinite. I mean, he really wanted that to be Frank land, and then Franklin. But Davy Crockett, if you ever ask somebody asks where Davy Crockett was born, in the state of Franklin. That's where he was born. Okay, so here's the second forgotten piece of history. Everybody knows about the gold rush in California, but this is the gold rush before the gold rush. This is the gold rush that made the gold rush possible. Because if it hadn't been for this gold rush, there wouldn't have been another gold rush. Because if it hadn't been for this gold rush, nobody would have known how to get gold out of the ground in the other gold rush. So, but everybody remembers the California gold rush, which, that really kind of populated the area. It assisted economic development, and it led to California's eventual statehood. But again, this was all made possible by the first gold rush in the United States, which began near the state of Franklin. It actually began in North Carolina 50 years before the gold rush in California. So in 1799, here's the story. There's a 12-year-old kid, Conrad Reed, and he's playing on a creek in his parents' farm when he stumbled across this strange-looking rock that weighed 17 pounds. So he lugged it home, showed it to his family, who apparently felt like it would make a great doorstep. And so it did. It was a doorstop for several years. And then in 1802, Conrad's father, after looking at this 17-pound rock for a while, he decided, well, maybe this is valuable. And he showed it to a local jeweler. Now, would you have known they had, who would know they had jewelers back then? But I would, I guess silversmiths, but a jeweler? It's like, I don't know. Anyway, the jeweler realized that it was gold. And he also realized that John Reed must not know that it is gold. So the jeweler generously offered to buy the 17-pound rock for $3.50. And they sold it. So Reed later learned the true value of his kid's find and gathered some local men. I mean, I'd gathered some local men to go beat the jeweler's butt, but he gathered local men to help scour the rest of his land for more of these rocks. And at one point, they found an even larger nugget that was 28 pounds. And this caused this big stir among the local landowners and in the newspapers. And so in the first few years to follow, farmers in the area began conducting their own searches on their own private land, which were also successful. But soon enough, the stream beds and other shallow areas and the plowed areas had been ripped clean. But by 1824, more than 2,500 ounces of gold had been deposited in the Philadelphia Mint. And in 1825, a man from Montgomery County, North Carolina, excavated the first lode mine shaft, which that was progressing gold mining technology and developing this profession out of mining. I mean, that was the first time it was a profession. And several mines were subsequently established. And by the 1830s, and then in 1835, President Andrew Jackson signed a law that opened 3 new branches to the Philadelphia Mint just to mint the gold that was coming out of this place. So the gradual increase of these skilled miners brought about this, by this first gold rush, really paved the way for the success of the one that we all know about, which is the California Gold Rush of 1849. And it was because of these North Carolina miners that the San Francisco NFL team had a name, the 49ers. Because if it hadn't been for the North Carolina guys, wouldn't have happened in 49 in California. And the NFL, what would their name have been? Who knows? Who knows? But that was all because of North Carolina. So isn't that great to know? Okay, so by the way, this is a rock I got today. How about that? Is that beautiful? Can you see? I don't know if you see that. Can you see that? But Craig brought me this rock. He was just out stoning his friends and decided to stone me with this pretty rock. Came with a great story, and I appreciate this very much. But this is I don't know if you can see that, but it's very pretty. Very pretty. So Mark Suter says, from farmers to miners. Yep. Now watch where we go here. Marcy Crosser Taylor, think that's interesting. Listen to number 3. Number 3. How about this? This is a story of when the government intentionally poisoned alcohol. How about that? Any jaws dropping out there? Okay, by the early 1900s, this idea of a national prohibition of alcohol had become a big deal, okay? I mean, it was a big deal, and it was up for debate in Congress. And when the U.S. entered World War I, these people who were wanting the prohibition in Congress, who outnumbered the opposition, they saw this new justification for a national alcohol ban. Limiting the production of alcohol would allocate more resources like grain to the war. That was their pitch, okay? And so in June of 1917, nationwide prohibition of alcohol was passed as a constitutional amendment by both houses in December. Now, though it supposedly had wartime intentions, okay? They supposedly had this excuse about this being helping the war. The amendment wasn't ratified until after the war was over in January 1919. So regardless, the prohibition of alcohol was added to the U.S. Constitution as the 18th Amendment. And this banned the production and the sale of intoxicating liquors. The production and the sale of intoxicating liquors. Notice it didn't ban the consumption, just the production and sale. So to outline the penalties for violating this new amendment, Congress passed the National Prohibition Act, and President Wilson vetoed it, and they overrode the veto. So this act effectively banned all liquor, wine, and beer in the country. The United States went dry on January 17th, 1920. But Americans are a sneaky lot, and they increasingly found creative ways to undermine the 18th Amendment and this National Prohibition Act. Now, one method that was employed by alcohol bootleggers was to steal industrial alcohols, which had not been banned, and resell them as beverages. Okay, I actually have, I need to bring this up here, but I actually have at my house. They look like miniatures, but they are flavorings for this industrial alcohol, and it's Scotch flavoring and gin flavoring, and the bottles are very, very old, and so I've got several of those bottles at home. But there was somebody that was making flavorings for this industrial alcohol, but this practice became so prevalent. There's an estimated 60 million gallons stolen annually by the mid-20s that the Treasury Department ordered manufacturers to poison industrial alcohols with additives. Now, this created what we call denatured alcohol to discourage consumption. When bootlegging chemists found ways to renature the denatured alcohol, even deadlier poisons like methanol were added. And so the intentional poisoning by the U.S. government of industrial alcohols led to the paralysis and death of thousands of drinkers who had bootlegged their beverages. One particular concoction made from industrial alcohol was called Ginger Jake, was reportedly responsible for crippling up to 100,000 American drinkers. All in all, it's estimated that approximately 10,000 people were killed by drinking denatured alcohol during this time period. But trust the experts. Trust the government. Go ahead. Yeah. No, there is a modern, I guess, sequel to this story. Now, I'm not going to name any names, okay? But when I was 12 years old, I was visiting a friend, and we had gotten Coca-Colas out of the refrigerator. We were upstairs in my friend's house, and he said, "Come here." And we went in the bathroom, and he pulled out a thing of rubbing alcohol, which is denatured alcohol, right? And he said, "You want some of this in your Coke?" And I was like, "No." He said, "Yeah, I drink it sometime with my Cokes." And I said, "Really?" He said, "You sure you don't want any?" And he's pouring some in his Coke. And I said, "No." And he goes, "Man, that's good." Poured a little more in there. About 20 minutes later, he was like on the floor, writhing in pain. And I ran downstairs to get his mother, but I didn't tell on him. Just, "What's wrong with him?" "He has a stomachache, I guess." But this guy is still my friend. He's alive, and he's still my friend. And I wonder if he's watching today, and I wonder if he remembers that. It's very cool of you, buddy. I thought you were very cool. And I did not tell. You could have died, but my lips were sealed. Okay. Serena Stoll Garner says, your great-grandpa had a Jake leg from drinking bad alcohol. Wow. Judith DeWitt, how about moonshine? Yeah, how about it? How about it? All right, you ready for number 4? Forgotten history. Number 4 is going to blow your mind. This is the story of the first female president of the United States. This actually happened. Yes, a woman functionally ran the executive branch for more than a year over a century ago. In August of 1914, President Woodrow Wilson lost his wife, Ellen. The following March, he was introduced to the widow Edith Galt, and as if he was in love at first sight. Wilson immediately began embarrassing himself and showering her with gifts and love notes. And, this is the President of the United States. His wife just died. And so these love notes, some of them probed for her opinion on presidential matters. But 3 months after they were introduced, Wilson proposed, and the two were married in December of 1950. I mean, people were scandalized. They were scandalized. Anyway, weren't so scandalized they didn't vote for him again because Wilson won another term, and his new wife became his constant companion. She attended his meetings, was given access to classified materials, and even filtered his mail. Toward the end of World War I, she accompanied the president to Europe to attend the 1919 Paris Peace Accords. Shortly after they returned, a stroke left Wilson paralyzed and bedridden. Now, instead of encouraging her husband to resign and be replaced by the vice president, Edith took on a number of his duties herself and hid the extent of his incapacity from the public and from other administrative, leaders. So from the time of his stroke to the end of his term in 1921, Edith Wilson was the only connection between the president and other officials, filtering all the presidential matters and determining what was important enough to be brought to his bedside. She was so serious about her new position as a presidential steward that when the Secretary of State conducted cabinet meetings without her being present, she had him removed from office. The Secretary of State. And when an ambassador arrived to help negotiate for the president's version of the League of Nations, she refused him the opportunity unless he fired an aide who had made a joke about her. Edith Wilson analyzed every message delivered to the president, barred all officials from bringing him business, assisted him in completing any necessary tasks, and naturally influenced domestic and international policy while she was doing so. That was the first president of the United States that was a female. How about that? She ran the place. And here's the last one. Yep, I know you hadn't heard of this, but this one is actually pretty funny to me and has lasting consequences. Young men back there, are you listening to this? This is American history here. I'm fixing to tell you about the big onion scam. Okay? This is the big onion scam. Now, let me explain something. In finance, a future is a financial contract that allows buyers to purchase a commodity at some point in the future for a price that is set today. The buyer, in this instance, obviously hopes that the price will go up, meaning they purchased it at a lower price today, while the seller hopes the price will go down. Shorting is when a futures seller sells borrowed futures, hoping that when it comes time to pay the owner, the price of the future will have gone down, and they can pocket the difference. Now, in 1955, onion futures became the most traded commodity on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It made up 20% of the trades. So two guys, Sam Siegel and Vincent Kosuga, they realized this. They realized that this is massive, 20%, and they realized the opportunity. So in the fall of that year, they literally bought tons and tons of onions and onion futures until these two guys controlled 98% of all the onions that were being traded in the Chicago Mercantile. By the end of the year, their combined amount of onions totaled 30 million pounds. Now, this is in 1955. So after cornering the market, Siegel and Kosuga started to short sell these onion futures. Now, typically, this would mean that they were betting that the price of onions would decline. They were betting that they would decline. But here, they weren't betting. They knew that if they started selling their ridiculous amount of onions, supply would dramatically increase and the price of these onions would fall drastically, so that's what they did. What's more, when their onions started to spoil, they sent them out to be cleaned and repackaged. And when they were shipped back, these large incoming shipments of what appeared to be new onions signaled incorrectly to futures traders that onions were in such abundance, and this only drove the price of onions even further down. So while these two guys made millions of dollars, the excessive amount of onions being shipped to Chicago caused shortages in the rest of the United States. Meanwhile, onions in Chicago were selling for 10 cents a bag, down from $2.75 a bag, selling for 10 cents a bag. And it bankrupted many farmers whose product was now just worthless. Soon the Commodity Exchange Authority got wind of what they had done, and they initiated a congressional investigation, and congressional hearings were held. And in the end, the Commodity Exchange Act was amended to prevent the selling of onion futures. And that law is still in effect today, making onions the only banned trading commodity in the United States. How about that? So, there you go. There's 5 forgotten history lessons. And, when you go out for lunch and have an onion on your hamburger, you can tell somebody nearby, let me tell you a story about the big onion scam of 1955. We appreciate you guys being with us. There's a lot happening in the world today, and we appreciate you taking a little time at lunch to learn and laugh and hang with us, and we appreciate you. And I will see you next week. We won't have a Blue Plate special on Thursday. I'll be gone. Just from the studio. I mean, not gone. I'll be just gone from here. Okay. But I will be there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm actually doing the Gaither Vocal Band reunion at the Mabee Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So all the guys who've been in the Gaither Vocal Band are coming to that arena, the Mabee Center, and it's a Friday and Saturday event, and I'm the only talker in the whole thing. I'm the only speaker. So anyway, we're going to have a great time, and you know, I have done something in that place before. You know, that's on the campus of ORU, Oral Roberts University, and I did back when I was working as a comedian. I did ORU twice, and one of the jokes that I did, I just thought of when I drove onto the campus. But the kids thought this was really funny. Oral Roberts probably didn't think it was funny at all. You know, I mean, I'm surprised I was asked back, but I said, but the big arena on campus, the basketball arena and the one they do for concerts and all, is called the Maybe Center, and so I said, wow, it's great to be here at ORU. And on the campus that they call, you know, it's amazing to me that they call this campus the City of Faith. And the biggest building is maybe. Anyway, glad to have you guys with us. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.